I know I'm not the only guy, or girl for that matter, who has resorted to online resources to get laid. In my book, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as both parties are looking for the same thing. I never lie about what I'm looking for. I'm always straightforward about looking for sex. Most of the girls I've met have been totally cool with it, and were looking for the exact same thing. There have been a few that claim they were looking for just sex, when in reality they were looking for a relationship. That didn't end well for any of us. That's why it's always a good idea to be totally honest with someone, including yourself. Her name was Heidi. I met her on a popular dating app. I was very clear in my bio about what I was looking for, and she seemed to be looking for the same thing. She was beautiful, and we sent a few pics back and forth and did a couple video chats to make sure there was no catfishing or filters going on. It's never good when you meet in person and they are nothing like their photos. She was just as gorgeous as she was in her pics, and she was into me too, so we set up a night to hang out. As a rule, I never put out on the first meet when it comes to dating or hookup apps. I want to make sure we're both into it, and no one is just going through with it out of obligation. That's just fucked up. Heidi said she was cool with that, and even respected it. We met last week at a local bar near us and had a few drinks. She was amazing. Other than being drop-dead gorgeous, she was so easy to talk to, easy to just be with. She flirted like a pro, and had me regretting my rule of no sex. We ended the night with a kiss before she left in an Uber. I couldn't wait until Friday, when I'd see her again, this time at her apartment. I brought a bottle of Fireball whiskey, her favorite, and some bearskin condoms, my favorite. Her apartment was on the 8th floor. The elevator was out of order, so I was stuck taking the stairs. The apartment building itself was not too bad, but it had a strange smell that permeated the entire place. I hoped her apartment didn't smell like that. It was a scent that made me sick the longer I smelled it. I knocked on her door and prayed my clothes didn't pick up the odor of the place. It took her a few minutes to come to the door, even though I could hear her in there moving around. I called out to her, asking if she was all right. I could hear a faint murmuring, as if she were talking to someone. On the phone, I guessed. I called her name loudly and knocked again, and heard a loud sort of scraping sound coming from inside. I started to worry, thinking she was hurt or in danger or something. I pressed my ear to her door and listened. The second my ear touched the wood, something crashed into the door, causing me to jump back from it. I even screamed, something I'm not proud of. A half a second later, the door opened, and Heidi was smiling back at me, wearing just a big white t-shirt. Her hair was a mess, like she'd just gotten up, and for a moment I thought she was sick. I was about to ask if she wanted to reschedule, but she jumped into my arms and pulled me into a tight hug. She smelled funny, like something damp and old, but not as awful as the smell in the building. I thought I could at least tolerate it for a few hours. She grabbed me by the hand and pulled me into her apartment, leading me to the sofa. It didn't smell inside, but that was possibly due to the dozens of candles she had lit all over the apartment. I guess she was trying to cover up the stink of the building and didn't want to bring it up in case it embarrassed her. She pushed me onto the sofa a bit harder than I'm into, but I went along with it. I asked if she was okay, but she just smiled and licked her lips in an attempt at being sexy, but totally missed the mark. She stood in front of me, swaying to music only she could hear, her eyes trained on me unblinking. I was watching her move, trying like hell to enjoy it, but it just felt weird to me. Something about her felt off. "You're hot, I'm hot. Sexy sex," she said, her voice much deeper than it had been previously. "Yeah," I said, stupidly. This shit was weird, what can I say? "Eat me," she moaned, roughly lifting her shirt. I might have gone through with it if her belly hadn't looked like she was 9 months pregnant. It's not like I have anything against pregnant women, but she wasn't pregnant when I'd last seen her the week before. And it looked painful. Hard and swollen, and bulging in some places. It was an immediate turn off. "You look like you're not feeling well. If you want to call it a night and do this another time, I'm cool with it," I said, trying not to sound rude. She made a sound, a cross between a burp and cough, and quickly squatted and threw up on the floor, a dark black or red liquid that smelled just like shit in the building. At that point I was pretty much done, and sure she was either high or very ill. I jumped to my feet and started asking if she needed me to do something. Call someone, anything. She looked up at me grinning, her pupils almost as large as her eyes, and growled, "Look, I don't know if you're on something or not, but sex isn't going to happen tonight," I said. She jumped to her feet so fast I dropped my fucking keys I'd been subconsciously holding in my fist for protection. I went to pick them up, ready to bolt the hell out of there, but she scooped them up before I could even bend down. "Give me my keys. I want to leave," I said sternly, holding out my hand. She laughed, deep and throaty, and held up my house key, staring at it like it was something she'd never seen before. "Heidi, I'm serious. Give me the damn keys," I said, no longer caring how rude I sounded. I was on the verge of calling the police when she did something I'll never forget. I'll never get this image out of my mind as long as I live. Heidi stood with her legs spread wide and angled the keys playfully in front of me, well out of reach. She winked at me, and with her other hand lifted her shirt to reveal her bulging belly underneath, and with the other hand, she thrust my house key hard up inside her. I nearly fucking fainted, especially when the blood began to trickle down her thighs onto her beige carpet. "Fuck. Are you fucking crazy?" I screamed. She laughed again, continuing that same horrific thrusting motion. For a split second, even though she was smiling, I could see her eyes full of fear and pain, silently pleading with me for help. I backed up to the door, my hand fumbling to open it. I didn't want to take my eyes off her, not for a second. "Want to see?" She giggled, and she opened her mouth so wide I thought her jaw would snap. I stared at her in frozen horror, watching as something creeped up her throat, resting on her tongue. Two pale fingers wiggled in the back of her mouth, the nails painted a pastel blue. I screamed, trying to twist the lock on the door. Heidi snapped her mouth shut and smiled. She lunged for me, grabbing my arms and pushing them against the door as she brought her head closer to mine. I screamed for help and tried pushing her off, but she was stronger than I was. I thought I would die in that smelly-ass apartment, but I was able to wrestle out of her grasp and somehow managed to get my keys from her. I pulled the door open and booked it down the hall. I looked back only once to see Heidi standing in the doorway, her face twisted in an expression of rage. I ran down the steps, falling more than once. I got to my car and got the hell out of there. I called the police, but I didn't know exactly what to say. I just said a girl was harming herself. I didn't hear back from them or Heidi. I stopped using apps to meet women, although it's not a sure thing that I won't run into something like that again. I drove past her apartment last night, just out of curiosity. The building is no longer being used and has been boarded up for some contamination. But something from the windows was watching me as I drove by, smiling down at me from the 8th floor. I'm terrified now and thinking of moving, because I never did find my fucking house key.